Captain Jake Morrison stared at the holographic display floating above the command table of the UNS Defiance. The blue light cast shadows across his weathered face as he studied the star chart that had haunted him for 3 years. 50 years had passed since the Great Evacuation. 50 years since the Galactic Council had promised to save humanity from certain death. 50 years since they had lied. The bridge hummed with quiet efficiency around him. Dr. Lisa Carter hunched over her science station, analyzing the latest sensor data from their long-range probes. Commander Tony Rodriguez checked weapon systems for the 3rd time that morning, his fingers dancing across tactical displays with practiced precision. At the communications console, Amy Sullivan monitored alien frequency channels, her headset crackling with distant conversations in languages most humans would never understand. Lieutenant Ben Parker sat at the pilot station, ready to jump to hyperspace at a moment's notice. They were survivors, all of them. Survivors of the greatest betrayal in human history. Jake remembered the day the Galactic Council ships had arrived at Earth. He had been 25 then, a junior officer aboard a cargo freighter. The aliens had come with their grand speeches about cosmic disasters and inevitable doom. A rogue planet, they said, was hurtling toward Earth's solar system. The gravitational disruption would tear the planet apart. Humanity had maybe 10 years before total extinction. The Council offered salvation. They would relocate every human to new worlds, safe worlds where mankind could start fresh. It seemed too good to be true, but the evidence was overwhelming. Telescopes confirmed the approaching celestial body. Scientists verified the calculations. Earth was doomed. The evacuation began immediately. Massive alien transport ships descended from orbit, each one capable of carrying millions of people. Families were separated in the rush. Children cried as they were loaded onto different vessels than their parents. Jake's own sister had been placed on a ship bound for a different sector entirely. He never saw her again. The journey to the new worlds took months. Humans were packed into cargo holds like livestock, fed nutrient paste and given barely enough water to survive. Many died during the trip. The aliens said it was necessary, that their resources were limited, that sacrifices had to be made for the greater good. When the ships finally arrived at their destinations, the horror became clear. The safe worlds were barely habitable rocks with thin atmospheres and toxic soil. Some had no water at all. Others were plagued by deadly storms that raged for months. The aliens dumped their human cargo and left immediately, claiming they had fulfilled their obligation. 80% of humanity died within the first decade. Disease, starvation, exposure, despair. Entire colonies simply vanished, their populations consumed by worlds that seemed designed to kill them. Those who survived did so through sheer stubbornness and ingenuity, adapting technology, growing food in impossible conditions, building shelters from scraps and determination. Jake had been lucky. His transport had crashed on Kepler 442b, a world with breathable air and underground water reserves. Only 3,000 of the original 50,000 passengers survived the first winter, but those who did learned to fight for every breath, every drop of water, every scrap of food. They built weapons from salvaged ship parts and defended themselves against predators that evolution had never intended humans to face. That was where Jake learned to hate the aliens who had supposedly saved them. Captain, Dr. Carter called from her station, pulling Jake from his memories. The probe data is coming through now. You need to see this. Jake walked over to her console, Tony and Amy joining them. The main screen filled with images from a long-range reconnaissance probe that had just completed a dangerous journey through Council space. What they saw made Jake's blood run cold. Earth hung in space exactly where it had always been. Blue oceans sparkled under familiar sunlight. White clouds swirled over continents that should have been destroyed 50 years ago. The planet was not only intact, it was thriving. The rogue planet never existed, Lisa said quietly, her voice shaking with controlled rage. Look at these mineral extraction readings. They've been strip mining Earth for decades. Rare earth elements, precious metals, energy crystals. Everything humans never had the technology to reach. The images showed massive alien mining operations dotting Earth's surface. Huge excavators tore into mountainsides while processing plants refined raw materials into valuable compounds. Orbital stations collected the refined goods and shipped them across the galaxy. Earth had become the Council's private mining colony. What about the human population? Amy asked. though she seemed afraid of the answer. Lisa's fingers flew across her controls, analyzing atmospheric readings and thermal signatures. Nothing. No human settlements, no human technology signatures, no human life signs at all. They cleared us out completely before they started mining. Tony slammed his fist on the console. Those bastards! They murdered an entire species just to steal our planet. Jake felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. For 50 years, humans had struggled to survive on hostile worlds, believing they had been saved from certain death. Instead, they had been victims of the largest genocide in galactic history. Their homeworld had been strip-mined while they died slowly on prison planets scattered across space. How many of us are left? Jake asked. Lisa pulled up population estimates from their intelligence network. Best guess is around 200 million humans scattered across maybe 40 worlds. Most colonies have fewer than 10 million survivors. Some have less than 1,000. From 8 billion to 200 million in 50 years. Jake closed his eyes and tried to process the magnitude of the crime committed against his species. Sir, Ben called from the pilot station. I'm picking up a priority transmission on the resistance frequency. It's Admiral Kate Henderson. Jake nodded. Henderson commanded the largest surviving human fleet, a collection of salvaged ships and improvised weapons that had been hiding in the outer rim for 20 years. If anyone could turn this information into action, it was her. The message was encrypted, but Amy quickly decoded it. Henderson's weathered face appeared on the main screen, her eyes hard with purpose. All human commanders, this is Admiral Henderson. Intelligence confirms what we've suspected for years. Earth was never in danger. The Council played us for fools and billions of our people died for their greed. It's time to stop running and start fighting back. Operation Retribution begins now. Jake looked around at his crew. These people had become his family over the years of exile and struggle. They had fought together, bled together, survived together when the entire galaxy had conspired to see them die. Well, he said simply. Tony was the first to speak. The Zephyrians killed my parents on New Colorado. I've been waiting 20 years for payback. Lisa nodded grimly. My daughter died of plague on Kepler 62F because the Council gave us contaminated medical supplies. They need to answer for that. Amy's young face was set with determination. My whole family was on Earth when the evacuation started. If they're dead because of Council lies, then I want justice. Ben simply powered up the navigation systems. Where to, Captain? Jake turned back to the star chart, but now it looked different. Instead of showing exile routes and hiding places, it showed targets. Council facilities, alien shipping lanes, military installations, all the infrastructure of the Empire that had built itself on human bones. Set course for the Henderson rendezvous point, Jake ordered. It's time humanity reminded the galaxy what we're capable of when we stop running and start hunting. The UNS Defiance dropped out of hyperspace near the Vega system, where Admiral Kate Henderson had established her hidden base inside a massive asteroid field. Jake Morrison watched through the view screen as dozens of human ships emerged from behind floating rocks, their hulls scarred by decades of desperate battles and makeshift repairs. Each vessel told a story of survival against impossible odds. Henderson's flagship, the UNS Retribution, was a patchwork giant built from the wreckage of 3 different alien vessels. Human engineers had welded salvaged plates over blast holes in jury-rigged weapons systems that no alien designer had ever intended. The ship looked like it might fall apart at any moment, but Jake knew it could probably outfight anything the Council had. Admiral Henderson is requesting immediate conference, Amy Sullivan reported from her communications station. She's transmitting docking instructions now. Jake nodded to Ben Parker, who guided the Defiance through the asteroid maze with practiced skill. The pilot had learned his trade dodging Council patrol ships and navigating the treacherous gravity wells of dead systems. Flying through floating rocks was easy compared to what they had survived. The docking bay of the Retribution buzzed with activity. Human technicians worked on weapon systems while engineers modified shield generators with parts that definitely had not come from human factories. Jake recognized Zephyrian plasma conduits and Altarian power cores, all of them salvaged from destroyed enemy ships or stolen during desperate raids. Admiral Henderson met them at the airlock. She was a tall woman in her 60s with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much death. Jake had served under her briefly during the early years of exile, before the survivors had scattered across the galaxy to avoid Council extermination fleets. Jake, she said simply, extending her hand. It's been too long. Admiral, Jake replied, shaking her firm grip. I see you've been busy, Henderson smiled grimly. 20 years of preparation. We've been waiting for proof like what your probe found at Earth. Now we can finally stop hiding and start hitting back. She led them through corridors lined with memorial walls. Thousands of names were etched into metal plates, representing the human colonies that had been wiped out by Council forces or simply died from the harsh conditions of their prison worlds. Jake found his sister's name among them and touched it briefly before moving on. The briefing room contained representatives from 47 human survivor colonies. Jake recognized some faces from the old days, while others were younger people who had been born in exile and raised on stories of Earth. All of them shared the same look of grim determination. Dr. Peter Collins stood at the central holotable, manipulating a three-dimensional display of Council space. Jake remembered Collins as a civilian physicist before the evacuation. Now he wore the uniform of the human resistance and carried himself like a man who had learned to build weapons instead of peaceful research projects. The intelligence from Captain Morrison's probe confirms what we've suspected, Collins began. Earth is not only intact, it's become the primary source of rare minerals for the entire Galactic Council. They've extracted enough wealth from our homeworld to fund their expansion into 12 new sectors. The holographic display showed shipping routes carrying Earth-stolen resources to every corner of Council space. Mining operations had scarred entire continents. What had once been the Amazon rainforest was now a massive crater, filled with extraction machinery. How many species are involved? Asked Captain Diana Ross, commander of stealth operations. Her ship specialized in infiltrating Council facilities and gathering intelligence. All 12 Council species profit from Earth's resources, Collins replied. But the Zephyrians control the operation directly. They've established a colonial government on Earth with nearly 50 million settlers living in human cities. Jake felt his hands clench into fists. Aliens were living in human homes, walking down human streets, probably sleeping in beds that had once belonged to families who died believing their world was destroyed. Elena Vasquez spoke up from across the table. She was a former Council prisoner who had escaped from a labor camp and brought valuable intelligence about alien operations. The Zephyrians have been using human children as slave labor in the deep mines. Kids who were hidden during the evacuation, born in secret or captured during raids on survivor colonies. The conditions are even worse than what we endured on the exile worlds. The room fell silent. Everyone knew about the failed colonies and the billions who had died from disease and starvation. But the thought of human children enslaved on their own homeworld added a new level of horror to their situation. How many children? Jake asked quietly. Intelligence estimates maybe 2 million across all the mining operations, Elena replied. They're used for work in narrow tunnels and dangerous areas where adult humans wouldn't fit. Admiral Henderson stood and activated another section of the holographic display. This is why we can't wait any longer. Every day we delay, more humans die and more of Earth gets destroyed. The Council thinks we're extinct or broken. They've gotten comfortable and careless. That's our advantage. The display showed Council military positions throughout known space. Most of their fleets were engaged in expansion wars against species that still had functioning governments and organized militaries. The forces guarding their core worlds were minimal, designed more for police work than serious combat. General Carl Murphy, Henderson's strategic commander, outlined their capabilities. We have approximately 300 combat-capable ships scattered across 40 systems. It's not much compared to Council fleets, but we've spent decades developing tactics they've never seen. We know how to hurt them. Jake studied the tactical displays. Human ships were individually weaker than Council vessels, but they had been modified with weapon systems that no alien engineer would ever design. Humans had learned to fight dirty during their years of exile, using ramming attacks, suicide drones, and weapons that violated every civilized rule of engagement. What about allies? Dr. Carter asked. Are there other species that oppose the Council? Collins manipulated the display to show several star systems marked in yellow. The Kepler Union, the Centauri Republic, and the Vegan Alliance have all been victims of Council expansion. They might support us if we prove we can actually hurt the Council rather than just survive. Henderson nodded. But we need to strike first and prove we're serious. I'm proposing Operation Retribution. Simultaneous attacks on Council facilities across 12 star systems. Hit their mining operations, free human prisoners, and capture their leadership for war crimes trials. When do we start? Jake asked. 6 months of preparation. We need to position our forces, gather more intelligence, and complete development of our new weapon systems. Henderson replied. Collins has been working on some interesting modifications to captured Council technology. The physicist smiled for the first time during the briefing. Let's just say the Zephyrians are going to be very surprised when their own plasma cannons start firing on their ships. Jake looked around the room at the faces of his fellow survivors. These people had lost everything, families, homes, entire worlds, but they had never lost their will to fight back. The Council had made a mistake when they chose to scatter humanity instead of simply killing them quickly. 50 years of suffering had forged them into something harder and more dangerous than they had ever been on Earth. Admiral, Jake said, the crew of the Defiance volunteers for any mission you need. We've been running and hiding long enough. Henderson smiled grimly. Then welcome to Operation Retribution, Captain. Time to remind the galaxy what happens when you try to wipe out the human race. 6 months later, Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UNS Defiance as it drifted silently through the outer system of Alpha Centauri. Around them, 30 other human ships waited in the darkness between planets, their engines cold and their weapons charged. Today was the day Operation Retribution would begin. Chief Engineer Sam Watson had worked miracles during the preparation months. Every human ship in the fleet had been upgraded with weapons and systems reverse-engineered from captured Council technology. The Defiance now carried plasma cannons that could punch through Zephyrian shields and torpedo systems that used Council targeting computers against their own vessels. Captain, Amy Sullivan whispered from her communication station, I'm receiving final confirmation signals from all strike groups. Admiral Henderson reports all forces are in position across 12 star systems. Jake nodded silently. Somewhere out there in the vast emptiness of space, 300 human ships were preparing to strike simultaneously at Council facilities. Mining stations, supply depots, military outposts, and slave camps would all come under attack within the next hour. After 50 years of running and hiding, humanity was finally going to fight back. Dr. Lisa Carter monitored the long-range sensors, watching for any sign that their presence had been detected. The Alpha Centauri system contained one of the largest human prison camps in Council space, where nearly 1 million people labored in underground factories producing weapons for alien armies. Most of them were children and teenagers who had never seen Earth, born in exile and raised as slaves. Commander Tony Rodriguez checked the tactical display one final time. Their target was Facility 7, a massive complex built into an asteroid where human prisoners manufactured plasma rifles and shield generators. Council records indicated that 15,000 humans were held there under conditions that barely kept them alive. Remember, Jake said quietly to his crew, our first priority is getting those people out alive. We're not here for revenge, we're here for rescue. Lieutenant Ben Parker brought the ship's engines online with barely a whisper of power. The pilot had spent months studying the facility's defenses and patrol patterns. 2 Zephyrian cruisers orbited the asteroid on predictable routes, while automated defense platforms provided additional coverage. On paper, the facility should have been impregnable to a single human ship, but humans had learned to fight differently during their years of exile. Stealth field activated, Lisa reported. Council sensors show us as space debris. The stealth technology was another gift from their alien enemies. Human engineers had salvaged cloaking devices from destroyed ships and modified them in ways that their original designers never intended. Instead of bending light around a vessel, the human version fed false information directly into enemy sensor networks. The Defiance glided silently toward the asteroid facility, while the Zephyrian cruisers continued their patrol routes. Jake watched the tactical display as red dots representing enemy ships moved in slow, predictable patterns. The aliens had grown comfortable after decades of easy victories over scattered human survivors. They never expected a coordinated attack. Infiltration team ready, Tony reported. Diana Ross confirms her people are in position. Captain Diana Ross commanded a team of specialists trained in close combat and demolitions. They had spent weeks studying the facility's internal layout and identifying the locations where human prisoners were held. The plan was simple: disable the guards, free the prisoners, and get everyone out before the alarm could be raised. Council patrol vessel approaching, Ben warned. Distance 2,000 kilometers and closing. Jake held his breath as the Zephyrian cruiser passed within easy weapons range. Its sensors swept over their position without detecting anything unusual. The alien crew was probably thinking about their next meal or wondering when their shift would end, never imagining that death was drifting silently beside them. Clear of patrol route, Ben reported after several tense minutes. The Defiance continued toward the asteroid facility. Jake could see it now through the view screen, a massive rock honeycombed with tunnels and chambers where humans lived and died to build weapons for their captors. Docking bays carved into the surface held transport ships that carried finished goods to Council military bases throughout the sector. "I'm detecting human life signs," Lisa said, studying her scanner readings. 15,047 individuals confirmed. "Most are showing signs of malnutrition and exhaustion, but they're alive." Jake felt something twist in his chest. 15,000 people who had survived everything the Council could do to break them. Children who had never seen sunlight or breathed fresh air. Adults who remembered Earth only as stories told in whispered conversations when the guards weren't listening. "Docking clamps engaged," Ben reported as they settled against an unused maintenance port. "Infiltration team is go." Diana Ross and her people moved through the facility like shadows. Human prisoners had been secretly providing intelligence about guard rotations and security systems for months, preparing for this moment. Zephyrian overseers were eliminated quietly, while automated systems were disabled with precisely placed charges. "Prison blocks 1 through 5 are clear," Diana reported over the comm system. "Beginning evacuation procedures now." Jake watched through security cameras that the infiltration team had hacked. Human prisoners moved quickly through corridors they knew by heart, carrying children and helping the sick and elderly. Many of them looked like walking skeletons after years of starvation rations, but their eyes burned with hope that Jake hadn't seen in decades. "Captain," Amy called urgently, "Council patrol vessel is changing course. They might have detected something." The Zephyrian cruiser had broken from its normal pattern and was moving toward the facility. Its sensors were active and searching, probably trying to identify what had triggered their automated warning systems. "How long until evacuation is complete?" Jake asked. 20 minutes minimum, Diana replied. "We've got people coming from deep mining levels. Some are too weak to move quickly." Jake made his decision. "Ben, prepare for combat maneuvers." "Tony, bring all weapons online. If they want to fight, we'll give them one." The Defiance detached from the asteroid and moved to intercept the approaching cruiser. Jake knew his ship was outgunned and outarmored, but human vessels had advantages that Council designers never considered. They were built by people who expected to die fighting, rather than people who expected to win easily. "Enemy vessel is scanning us," Amy reported. "They're demanding identification." "Tell them we're maintenance workers," Jake said. "Buy us another few minutes." The Zephyrian cruiser continued its approach while its captain tried to understand what was happening. Council forces rarely encountered serious resistance, and their response protocols were designed for dealing with desperate refugees rather than organized military action. "Sir," Lisa said suddenly, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. Other human ships are beginning their attacks." The tactical display lit up with weapon fire as human strike teams hit Council facilities across the Alpha Centauri system. Mining platforms exploded in brilliant flashes while transport ships tried desperately to escape the unexpected assault. The aliens had been caught completely off guard. "Enemy cruiser is powering weapons," Tony warned. "They figured out we're not maintenance workers." "Fire at will," Jake ordered. The Defiance opened fire with plasma cannons that had been built from salvaged Zephyrian technology. The irony was perfect. Council weapons destroying Council ships. The cruiser's shields flared and collapsed as human gunners put 50 years of hatred into every shot. "Direct hit on their weapon systems," Tony reported with satisfaction. "Secondary explosions throughout their hull." The Zephyrian cruiser began to list as atmosphere vented from multiple hull breaches. Its crew had never faced an enemy that fought with such focused fury. They surrendered within minutes, probably expecting the merciful treatment that civilized species offered to defeated foes. "Evacuation complete," Diana announced. "All prisoners are aboard our ships and ready for transport." Jake looked at the main screen, which showed the damaged Council cruiser floating helplessly in space. He could order its destruction and nobody would blame him. The Zephyrians had murdered billions of humans and enslaved millions more. They deserved to die. Instead, he opened a communication channel to the alien vessel. Zephyrian ship, this is Captain Morrison of the United Nations Starfleet. Your vessel is disabled and your facility is destroyed. Surrender your crew for processing as war criminals or we will resume firing. The response came quickly. Human ship, we surrender. Please don't kill us, Jake smiled grimly. After 50 years of being hunted across the galaxy, it felt good to hear aliens begging for mercy. The news of human victory spread across Council space faster than their fastest ships could travel. Within days of the first attacks, every alien species in the galaxy knew that humanity had returned from the dead and was hunting their former captors with terrifying efficiency. Jake Morrison stood in the command center of Admiral Henderson's mobile base, watching tactical displays that showed the results of Operation Retribution's first phase. 37 Council facilities had been destroyed or captured. Over 200,000 human prisoners had been freed from slave camps and mining operations. Most importantly, the aliens were finally afraid. Intelligence reports are coming in from all sectors, Dr. Peter Collins announced, his voice filled with satisfaction. The Zephyrian High Command has declared a state of emergency. They're pulling ships back from expansion territories to protect their core worlds. General Carl Murphy manipulated the holographic display to show enemy fleet movements. Red dots representing Council vessels were converging on heavily defended systems while abandoning their frontier outposts. The aliens were abandoning 50 years of conquest to deal with what they saw as a human uprising. How are our people holding up? Jake asked Elena Vasquez, who had been coordinating the care of freed prisoners. Better than expected, she replied. Most of the children have never seen anything except prison camps, but they're adapting quickly. The adults remember stories about Earth and want to help with the liberation. Jake nodded. Many of the freed prisoners had volunteered to join human combat units despite having no military training. They wanted revenge against the species that had stolen their lives, and they were willing to die for the chance to strike back. Captain Morrison, Admiral Henderson called from across the command center. I have a special mission for you and the Defiance crew. Jake walked over to where Henderson stood beside a secure communication terminal. The screen showed Captain Diana Ross reporting from a captured Council facility in the Proxima system. Her face was grim despite their recent victory. Admiral, we found something here that changes everything, Diana said. The facility computers contained complete records of Project Genesis. It's worse than we thought. Henderson activated the holographic projector, filling the air above them with technical schematics and population charts. Jake studied the alien text which had been translated by their computer systems into readable English. Project Genesis is the Council's long-term plan for Earth, Henderson explained. They've been terraforming it for the past 20 years, reshaping the continents and atmosphere to suit Zephyrian biology. When they're finished, it won't even be recognizable as humanity's homeworld. Jake felt cold rage building in his chest as he studied the plans. The aliens weren't content with simply stealing Earth's resources. They wanted to erase every trace that humans had ever existed there. Cities were being demolished, forests replanted with alien vegetation. Even the oceans were being chemically altered to support different forms of life. There's more, Diana continued from the screen. We found transportation records. The Zephyrians have moved over 50 million colonists to Earth in the past decade. They're not just mining it, they're claiming it as their new homeworld. Dr. Lisa Carter appeared beside Jake, having overheard the briefing. Captain, this explains the deep mining operations we detected. They're not just extracting minerals. They're excavating human cities and artifacts to make room for their own construction projects. How long until the terraforming is complete? Jake asked. Henderson consulted the captured data. According to these records, maybe 5 more years. After that, Earth's atmosphere will be toxic to human life. Even if we retook it, we couldn't live there anymore. Jake stared at the holographic images of his transformed homeworld. Alien spires rose where human skyscrapers had once reached toward the sky. Strange forests covered landscapes that should have held wheat fields and suburban neighborhoods. The blue marble that had given birth to humanity was being systematically erased from existence. We need to accelerate our timeline, General Murphy said. If we wait too long, there won't be an Earth left to liberate. Agreed, Henderson replied. Captain Morrison, I'm assigning you to lead the Advanced Reconnaissance mission. Take the Defiance to Earth's solar system and gather intelligence on their defenses. We need to know exactly what we're facing before we commit our entire fleet. Jake felt his pulse quicken. After 50 years of exile, he was finally going home. The thought terrified and excited him in equal measure. Would he recognize the world that had given birth to his species? Or would the aliens have already destroyed everything that made it human? "When do we leave?" he asked, immediately. "But Jake, this isn't just about gathering information. We've identified the location where they're holding human artifacts and historical records. Museums, libraries, government archives. Everything they stripped from human cities before demolishing them." Henderson activated another section of the display, showing a massive facility built into what had once been the Rocky Mountains. Alien architecture merged with human engineering in a complex that stretched for dozens of kilometers underground. "They call it the Archive of Extinct Species," Henderson continued. "It contains artifacts and records from every civilization the Council has destroyed over the past 1,000 years. Human culture is just the latest addition to their collection." Jake studied the facility schematics. The complex was heavily defended by automated systems and garrisoned by elite Zephyrian troops. Breaking into it would require precision, stealth, and more than a little luck. "What exactly are we after?" he asked. "DNA samples, cultural records, and most importantly, the quantum resonance data from Earth's original magnetic field," Dr. Collins interjected. "If we're going to reverse the terraforming process, we need that information. Without it, even a military victory would be meaningless." Jake understood. The scientists needed the original planetary data to restore Earth's natural systems after they drove out the aliens. It wasn't enough to win battles. They had to be able to rebuild their homeworld when the fighting was over. "The Defiance leaves in 6 hours," Henderson announced. "Tony Rodriguez will command a support team aboard the stealth ship Phantom. Lisa Carter and Ben Parker are cleared for the mission. Amy Sullivan will coordinate with our intelligence network on Earth." Jake nodded to his crew members. They had been together for years, fighting impossible battles and surviving against overwhelming odds. If anyone could infiltrate Earth's defenses and steal back humanity's stolen heritage, it was them. "One more thing," Henderson said quietly, drawing Jake aside. "Our contacts on Earth report that there are still humans hiding in the underground cities. Maybe 1 million people who went into hiding during the evacuation and have been living in secret for 50 years. Jake felt his heart skip. Survivors on Earth itself? "Confirmed. They've been sabotaging Council operations and protecting human artifacts that the aliens couldn't find. They know we're coming, and they're ready to help." "But Jake, some of them have been living underground for their entire lives. They've never seen the surface world that the aliens have built on top of their homes." The weight of responsibility settled on Jake's shoulders like a physical burden. He wasn't just leading a reconnaissance mission. He was going to make contact with the last free humans on Earth and coordinate the liberation of humanity's homeworld. Success would mean the beginning of the end for the Council's genocide. Failure would mean the permanent extinction of human civilization. "We'll bring them home," Jake said simply. "All of them," Henderson smiled grimly. "I know you will, Captain. Now go get our planet back." Jake Morrison had dreamed of this moment for 50 years. But nothing could have prepared him for what he saw when the UNS Defiance dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. His homeworld hung in the darkness ahead, but it was no longer the blue marble he remembered from childhood photographs and old video recordings. The continents were wrong. Where North America should have been green and brown, strange purple vegetation covered the landscape in geometric patterns that hurt to look at. The oceans had turned a sickly yellow-green color, and massive artificial islands dotted the Pacific where no land had existed before. Alien cities sparkled across the surface like infected wounds, their twisted spires reaching toward space in defiance of human architectural principles. "Dear God," Dr. Lisa Carter whispered from her science station, "what have they done to it?" Lieutenant Ben Parker adjusted the ship's sensors to get a better view. The data that came back made Jake's stomach twist with rage and sorrow. Earth's atmosphere contained chemical compounds that would be toxic to human lungs. The magnetic field had been artificially altered to match Zephyrian biological needs. Even the length of the day had been changed by massive gravitational manipulation devices placed at the planet's poles. "Captain," Amy Sullivan reported quietly, "I'm receiving a transmission on an old human frequency. It's very weak, coming from somewhere underground." Jake nodded for her to put it through. The voice that emerged from the speakers was scratchy and faint, but unmistakably human. "Unknown vessel, this is New York Underground Command. Identify yourself immediately or we will assume you are a Council ship and respond accordingly." Jake took the communication headset with hands that trembled slightly. After 5 decades of exile, he was finally talking to humans who had never left Earth. New York Underground, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Nations Starfleet. We've come home. There was a long pause before the voice responded. Captain Morrison, this is Colonel Mary Davis. We've been waiting 50 years for someone to say those words. Welcome back to Earth. The next few hours passed in a blur of encrypted communications and careful coordination. Colonel Davis and her people had been living in expanded subway tunnels and basement complexes beneath what had once been New York City. They had survived by scavenging supplies from abandoned human settlements and conducting sabotage operations against alien construction projects. There are underground communities in every major city, Davis explained during their first secure video call. Maybe 1 million people total scattered across the planet. We've been planning for this day since the council ships first arrived. Jake studied the colonel's weathered face on the communication screen. She was about his age, with gray hair and scars that told stories of decades spent fighting a guerrilla war against impossible odds. Behind her, he could see other humans moving through tunnels that had been carved from solid rock by hand tools and determination. What can you tell us about the archive facility? Jake asked. Davis smiled grimly. We've been infiltrating that place for 20 years. The aliens think their security is perfect, but they never considered that humans might still be living in the old maintenance tunnels underneath their complex. We know exactly where they keep our cultural artifacts and historical records. Commander Tony Rodriguez leaned forward. What about military defenses? We need to know what we're facing when the main fleet arrives. Orbital defense platforms, automated weapon systems, and maybe 50,000 Zephyrian troops scattered across the surface, Davis replied. But most of their forces are concentrated around the major cities and mining operations. The underground resistance has been feeding them false intelligence about our numbers and capabilities for decades. They think we're just a few thousand desperate refugees hiding in caves. Jake felt hope building in his chest. The aliens had made the same mistake that conquerors throughout history had always made. They had underestimated the determination of people fighting for their homeland. Over the next week, the Defiance worked with underground resistance cells to prepare for Operation Homecoming. Ben Parker used his piloting skills to deliver supplies and weapons to hidden bases scattered across Earth's surface. Lisa Carter analyzed soil and water samples to determine how much damage the terraforming process had caused. Amy Sullivan established secure communication networks that would coordinate the attack on multiple fronts simultaneously. The breakthrough came when Colonel Davis led a team into the archive facility and transmitted complete intelligence on its layout and defenses. The complex was even larger than Admiral Henderson had suspected, containing millions of artifacts from dozens of extinct civilizations. Human culture occupied an entire wing of the facility, with everything from ancient cave paintings to space shuttle components preserved in climate-controlled storage chambers. There's something else, Davis reported during their final planning session. The Zephyrians have been using human genetic material to create hybrid species. They're trying to preserve what they see as useful human traits while eliminating what they consider dangerous. Our independence, creativity, and refusal to accept authority. Jake felt sick. The aliens weren't content with simply stealing humanity's homeworld. They wanted to remake the human species itself into something more compliant and controllable. How long until the main fleet arrives? Davis asked. Jake checked his chronometer. Admiral Henderson reports that all forces are in position. The attack begins in 6 hours, coordinated across the entire solar system. As the final countdown began, Jake found himself standing on the bridge of the Defiance, looking down at the world that had given birth to his species. Somewhere below the alien cities and terraformed landscapes, the bones of human civilization lay buried but not forgotten. Children who had never seen the sun were preparing to fight alongside veterans who remembered when Earth's skies were blue. The attack began at dawn, Earth time. Admiral Henderson's fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, catching the orbital defense platforms completely by surprise. Human ships that had been built from salvaged alien technology opened fire with weapons that their former owners had never intended to be used against them. Jake led the assault on the archive facility, while Tony Rodriguez commanded strike teams that liberated underground resistance fighters across the planet. The Zephyrian defenders fought desperately, but they had grown soft during 50 years of easy conquest. Human fighters who had been raised on stories of Earth's beauty and trained by decades of bitter exile proved unstoppable. The battle for Earth's surface lasted 3 days. When it was over, alien cities burned across every continent while human survivors emerged from underground shelters to see sunlight for the first time in their lives. The Zephyrian colonial government surrendered unconditionally when faced with war crimes, tribunals, and the prospect of sharing the fate they had inflicted on billions of humans. Jake stood in what had once been Central Park, now covered with alien vegetation that would take decades to remove. Around him, human survivors worked alongside liberation forces to begin the long process of restoring their homeworld to its natural state. The terraforming process could be reversed, the scientists confirmed, but it would take time and resources that humanity was determined to provide. Colonel Davis approached him as he watched children from the underground cities play in the strange purple grass. They laughed and ran despite having spent their entire lives in tunnels, their joy infectious even in the midst of devastation. "What happens now?" she asked. Jake looked up at the sky where human ships were already beginning construction of new orbital facilities and defense platforms. Never again would Earth be left defenseless against alien invasion. "Now we rebuild," he said simply, "and we make sure that nobody ever forgets what happens when you try to wipe out the human race." The war was over, but humanity's real work was just beginning.